Hey y'all, it's Bomber at Bomber's Garage, and once again I'm with my good friend Roger Rosebush of Rosebush Racing, and we're going to do 10 questions with him. I just want to say thank you real quick. He took me to one of the hot local spots, Silver Palace, which has been around since like
Yeah, forever.
forever, 1800s. I've been allowed in the basement in there because I want, I have this infatuation with basements because from in the South, we don't have basements. They would fill up with water pretty quick.
Oh yeah.
But he had the cod and I had the fried perch, and it was delicious. And
Yay. Well,
thank
that's
you
a
for
good
that.
way to start off our project here today.
That's right. That's right. We're going to have to keep it exciting where we don't get too tired. And then we
Yeah.
have behind us this beautiful mural which extends
40 foot long and it's 10 foot tall.
10 foot tall.
Bomber. It's a hand painting by Scott Schaefer that was around a lot of our muraling here in Bay City. And if you looked at the building on the other side and any of the other artwork around, pretty much a local guy that has since passed, but a real talented fella.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's a beautiful. I was like, this is going to be a great backdrop for us.
Yeah.
So we're going to do 10 questions, then 10 quick fire questions with a couple of bonus ones in there. And I'm sure a lot of people, want to talk to you about Be Cool and radiators and cooling and stuff like that. But this series that we're doing is talking about his personal projects, your cars, and all that stuff. So are you ready to do this 10 questions?
I think we're in my large man cave, and we've got plenty to talk about. So yeah, let's get a start on it and see how it goes.
Okay, what was your first car?
Well, my very first car was a '57 Chevrolet. It was a four-door, six-cylinder, and then my next-door neighbor across town in Bay City donated a '55 Chevy that was actually running, and I got the '57. Got the motor out of the '55, put it in the '57, and then we really, our first real serious car was a '57 two-door wagon, just like what's parked over here on the side that we'll talk about here in a bit.
Yes, sir.
But a 283 with a 4-speed and a 48 ring and pinion. Here in Bay City, we were a terror when we were 16 years old.
I bet that is an amazing car to have.
Yeah, it was
For sure.
a station wagon for a kid.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
So, yeah, it was fun.
Not to
Still is.
incriminate you, but you didn't do like, any type of street racing or anything like that.
Well,
did
you know what? We did have an issue with the state police one night. I did get pulled over a number of times with the second '57 that was a 210, a little fancier '57, two-door wagon, but it had a 4.25 horse 427 in it with the 400 turbo hydro and a bit of a rear end. And that car would really run, because a lot of people didn't realize how light a little '57 two-door station wagon was.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
not a heavy car. In fact, I believe it was lighter than a Camaro at that time.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, we had our share, but we never got thrown in jail. We never was drinking and driving, but we sure had a good time going to the hot dog stand.
Oh, I bet. So overall in your life, are you more of a carburetor man or a fuel injection man?
Well, I'm going to say that I race a 283 with a 4GC carburetor, which is a low CFM carburetor, but it can be a really responsive, and a 500 horsepower 283 is a really good match. But when I think of let's say, my Chevrolet background, which I'm more favorable to GM than I am, I think, anything else. I love them all, but the 283, the fuel injected V8 in '56, '57, GM come out with that, and that was the first V8 engine, I believe, that made 1 horsepower per cubic inch. And when you look at it, we had some pictures initially when we walked through with you, and that motor is being finished up right now, and we'll probably feature that down the road so we can show you something that's in process. It's being all done here in Bay City, Michigan, and we like to stay local with the hot rodders Pat McCarthy is the engine builder. I've been collecting all the parts.
Yes.
And we've been getting lucky with the fella Jim Matuszewski, my brother Terry. Just guys that find a pulley or find a harmonic balance or a camshaft or whatever, all these little pieces. It's like an Easter egg hunt, and we're almost at Easter. So
That is awesome.
we're having some fun.
That is fantastic. Automatics or stick shift?
Well, you know what? I'm a four-speed guy, and I think every car, every truck, whatever you got needs two pedals, a clutch pedal and a brake pedal and a gas pedal. So unlike a bicycle, it needs to have an extra pedal because I am a manual shift guy,
Yes, sir.
especially in a race car or a performance car. Now my truck would have an automatic, which is a 10-speed Allison, which is a really cool outfit. But as far as I'm concerned, unless a car is raced like the little Firebird behind, that's an automatic. It's always been that way. And we wanted to keep the authenticity as best
Oh,
as we
definitely.
could. But my drag car has always had a standard shift, and it's a great driving car, and you just have to be quick with your hands and your feet. So you got to have good motor skills to do such a thing.
Yes, sir.
And every hundredth of a second makes a difference in that car.
Oh, for sure.
So it's a discipline that doesn't come just, it takes practice, and practice will allow you to get the harmony of what the motor's doing and when to shift and when to stay out of it or into it. That's what makes it 54 years of doing fun.
Oh, yes, sir. How about a car that got away? Is there one that got away that you wish that you still had?
You know, I went on my first, let's say, Corvette date with my wife, Deb, and I had a red with the red interior, 66, tri-powered, big block Chevrolet Corvette. And it had the teakwood steering wheel and the leather seats, and I mean, it was a beautiful car. It was, it actually was a small port 427, so it really ran and had good low-end torque. And it just looked nice for that era, and it would run about as quick as I'd like to drive it. But my wife didn't ask me to lift off the gas like a few of my buddies did when they
Yes,
took
sir.
a ride with me, because it was quick. From 0 to 100 and stop, you could do in probably 12 seconds.
Yes, sir.
So we spent a lot of time out on M15 here in Bay City, just tuning the cars and getting them done. Mike Zan actually built the car and made it look as pretty as it could, and he did a lot of the tuning work on it. So again, back to the carburetors, that had 3 carburetors, and if you had the distributor and all of the advanced curves correct and the vacuum pulling the carbs open, boy, those things would run like a raped ape.
They would get after it.
Oh my goodness.
I feel that M15 could possibly be a pretty good drag strip at certain places.
Well, I can tell you, we spent a lot of times going up and down there way too quick. In fact, the fellow that drove the Chevelle back in the early days had a bad accident in his Corvette going way too fast in clement weather, and he ended up taking his life by end over ending his
Oh, my
Corvette.
goodness.
So, you know, as roads get older and more deteriorated and things, you got to be really careful. But I will tell you, we took a lot of fast rides from here to Frankenmuth down M15. I can promise you that.
Yes, sir. Now, I know with the, I listened to your connections with like GM, especially their influence in this area and having a General Motors plant here. But if you had to choose from like, Ford, Chevy, or, Dodge, is there a certain one you would just like, you could only stick with that brand?
Well, I can tell you some of my thoughts. I'm a GM guy and always have been. Don't mind saying. But we've done cooling and we've done a lot of special projects for all the different Fords. Sonny Hagar being one of them. John Lombardi down in Detroit, who's a retired GM Tech Center guy. When I work with those guys and they kind of share the Henry Ford program more in the Detroit area, Livernois down in there. The Bay City, a lot of people don't know that I believe there's 11 or 12 GM factories that are privately held or GM based from Saginaw, Flint, Bay City, in our general area, 50 miles from where we're sitting.
Oh, for sure.
And we did a lot of, in fact, we're only a mile away from the powertrain here in Bay City. And for those that don't know, they just changed names because they're developing, I think, the seventh platform of the LT motors that are carbureted and that are good for pulling campers and heavy, like horse trailers or anything like that. There's still a big market, and there's a big backup because they can't build the engines and the trucks fast enough to meet that market. So it's going to be around. Carburetors are going to be around for a good long time, and a lot of that work will be done here in Bay City. Now, because I think the influence of EVs and some of the hybrid applications, they're calling it propulsion systems, not GM powertrain.
Gotcha.
So, there could be some Delphi stuff in Saginaw, let's say the old steering gear, and the General Motors transmission plants. That's where we worked when we were kids. My father ran the credit union for GM in Saginaw on Genesee, but it was converting into all of the new disc brakes and things that happened in the mid 70s. So we played a role. My brother Terry was there for 30-some years. I only lasted about 18 months, and then I had to start selling headers and carburetors and all that stuff.
Yes, sir. I get that for sure.
Yes.
So, probably about 10 or 15 years ago, my buddy Rusty Dean ordered a Be Cool radiator for his S10 with a 350 in it. Do you remember selling that to him or packaging it up?
I will say that our S10 experience was really something, because at that time we were looking at new products, and what we did was, if we got enough calls on a given project, let's say, then we'd say,
needed to
oh,
jump on
okay,
it?
yeah, we'll make one for that. So we made an S10 radiator, and then we advertised it at Jegs and Summit and Motor State, all of the bigger warehouses around the country. And we thought we could sell maybe 20 in a year. In that year, advertised the way we did at that time, because there was no internet, there wasn't any Facebook, internet, any of that kind of a thing. So basically, you had to pick up a Hot Rod magazine or a Jegs catalog or a Summit catalog. We sold 1,100 conversions in 1 year for an S10 application.
Oh, yeah.
And it was amazing because it went from nothing to our number one part, even over a first-gen Camaro at that time, which is still the number one most popular radiator I think people buy when they replace OEM copper brass with an aluminum
those.
upgraded radiator.
For sure.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
he
we're-
said his came from Jags, and he might
Yes.
still have the sticker on the toolbox.
I'm going to say that most of us have had a Jegs sticker. I
I
grew
see.
up, yep, oh, well, we got them on the walls here,
Yes,
but I
sir.
grew up with the Coughlin family, back from probably the early 70s, when I visited their warehouse and their speed shop that was quite old school in comparison. And then Mr. Coughlin, Jed Coughlin Sr., when he opened up the new $55 million warehouse in Delaware, Ohio, he was running a Pro Stock car at that time, and he won the world championship with the Pro Stock car. And I remember him at the ribbon cutting saying that this new $55 million top of the top distribution center was more difficult to win the Pro Stock championship than it was to build a building of this intensity, which I thought that goes to show you how complex and how much effort it takes to win a Pro Stock championship.
Oh, yes, sir.
And it's probably still like that today.
For sure. The next, and I know we've talked about this before, but I want to pump it. NHRA or NASCAR?
Oh boy. Well, NHRA is obviously the drag strip straight line. Started in '51 with Wally Parks out in California, and then, of course, went across the country to take street racing to a legitimate place to have a racetrack in the safety the safety crew and all of that. And then if you elevate that, you really move into the NASCAR world where there's a lot of, let's say the Hendricks people, the Jack Roush's of the world, Richard Childress and his camp, Doug Yates, the oil people, some of the people that drive that industry, and it's more of a entertainment kind of a thing. I think for both of those, or the IHRA people, or a lot of the sanctioning bodies for, let's say, rock crawling in Reno, Nevada and such, or the Bajas and those kinds of things, there's an element of that that's really more driven towards the public and drawing big crowds of people, so that the promoters can continue to develop and afford those types of things, which go hand in hand. And then you got what we've done our whole life, the sportsman racing, which is there's just as much skill and talent, I think. The cost is prohibitive. It's getting more and more expensive. The fuels, the tires, the events that you can travel to. When you got $3 to $4, $5 for a tank or for a gallon of gas, it makes it pretty prohibitive when we'll use like a California Gold, which is a high blend, which you get horsepower. So it's just a matter of an oil change instead of $20 cost $125
Oh, yes,
now.
sir.
So, but the fun hasn't gone away. The industry is maybe shrinking to some degree and has its own challenges, but racers it's a good habit to have, and it's a good habit, and it's a great industry. The SEMA people, the PRI people, all of these industry events that, that bring together big crowds of people and provides employment. And it's it's kind of a college degree in some. Then the electronics play a role in that today, and all of what we're doing here with video work, the transferring of information, which is one of my primary goals, and I think yours too,
Yes.
Bomber, is to pass along some of the history that maybe there's one little thing that comes out of our meeting today that will be helpful for somebody that wanted to know that, didn't quite know that. We're not 100% accurate, but I will tell you we've done a lot of and have a lot of experience in this, and this is definitely not our first rodeo.
Yes, sir. Most definitely. Are you a big block or a small block guy?
Oh my goodness. Well, if I want to turn 10,000 RPMs, I'm a small block guy.
Yes.
I have no business putting a big block in those kinds of RPM ranges. But like I go back to my drag car has always been a small block, high winding, 292 cubic inch motor.
Yes.
With a small carburetor and some serious dynoing and carburation and tuning and all of the things that, let's say, an MSD grid will allow us to do now, clutch slippage, tire slippage, drive speeds, all of those things that will give us statistical data. And then when I look at a combination of a big block or a small block, I'm going to say in a street car, I love a big block, especially a tri-powered big block, because you've got three nice carburetors, you got a nice sound, you got a 6,500, maybe 7,000 RPM big block, and they just make all kinds of torque, and the drivability and the fun is more suitable for a street car.
Yes.
Although I certainly don't mind having like that little car behind us and that little orange 69Z, the 302 that's in that car, that little high winding 302. But
It's fun.
street cars, big blocks, drag cars, small blocks.
Yes, sir. Is there a place for the straight sixes and slant sixes in racing?
Well, absolutely. There's some of the most creative guys, Mike Cates being one of them down in Covington, Tennessee, or Milan, Tennessee. He likes the little four cylinders, 6 cylinders. And when you look at, let's say, the sanctioning bodies like NHRA, and there's a few guys like in the Flint area that are top level people, I mean, like Indy level people in drag racing that's built those combinations because they're odd. They're very, like the little 4-cylinder Pontiac engine that they put in the Tempest. Guys will put a little turbocharger on those things or a supercharger of some kind. Mickey Thompson was one of them Pontiac-driven guys. But I would say that's a creative way to go racing, but they make a lot of torque. You can wind them up, and they make a lot of power, and they really fit into certain classes in ways that a V8 wouldn't. And they're a little bit lighter. In some cases, they might be a little lighter, not in comparison to an all-aluminum small block, but in relation to a V8, they're a pretty interesting look, and they sound crazy.
Oh, they do. Yes, sir. Trucks. Are trucks for towing or for racing or both?
Oh my goodness. Well, you got anything from the truck series that's a step down from the cups in the NASCAR world, I'll call that. You've got my 6.2 liter pulling truck, which is a daily driver, but pulls the trailer, the race rig with the spare motors and all the extra weight and things like that. And it'll pull up a hill in Kentucky like nobody's business. And you can sit in the seat and turn your air conditioning on or your Bose stereo, and yes.
Oh, yes.
Convenience, yes. Mileage, not so much with the trailer. Without the trailer, it's very good in the mileage. But then again, if you look at the square body truck market or the real early trucks, even the stuff I think that you like that's, 32, 33, in that old school truck, they're really compact vehicles, but they're hot rodded. They're really cool with multiple carburetions or an old school blower like a BMW or a B&M blower or possibly a crawler unit or I don't know, all of those real fancy jobs that seem to get thrown away or they're still stuck in guys' barns and garages up here.
Oh, yes, sir.
So BDS would be another one that's really really something. But any of the, let's say, the blowers that a lot of the California companies had, and the cam companies in California, they're very creative because you got 102-year-old Ed Iskandarian who still calls me at night and asks me about these hard heat-treated GM LS camshafts. Well, how can you beat that for 102 years old? You got to talk loud when you're talking to him.
Yes.
But he knows exactly what you're talking about and a lot about the small block Chevrolets and every other thing from a Hemi on down.
Oh, yes, sir.
He loves them Hemis.
That is awesome. Do you have a favorite car show to go to?
Oh, well, I've been fortunate enough to be in car shows as far as Adelaide, Australia, or Sydney, Australia, in Birmingham, England, all throughout Canada. But the ones that I remember that were really fun is Hot August Nights out in Reno, Nevada. Mm-hmm. That's a must-see, and that's the first week of August. It goes on around Bonneville time, Speed Week out in Bonneville. Yes. And then there was a Back to the 50s event in Minnesota that was in their fairgrounds. Just a beautiful setting, 10,000 cars. You had to walk because they had all of the streets for the fairgrounds where people would walk. But the quality of cars, the hot rodding, the music, the bands, all of that was a real good kick. We've had awesome times at Woodward Avenue down in Detroit. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest one that we've ever seen by far. A couple million people maybe and a couple 100,000 cars, hot rods, no matter where you look. They're backed up from place to place. You can't overlook St. Ignace. St. Ignace has a good reputation, and for that little city, it brings a few $1 million in per year.
Oh, yeah.
And now that's kind of got to be a major place. You can't overlook Frankenmuth, which is right here, Friday night at a Frankenmuth. Yeah, baby, that's a fun time.
Place to
So, yeah, and some of the California events, the Good Guys events, whether you're in Texas or California or the different places where they might go, Street Rod Nationals. You can't forget the Auburn Duesenberg Cord Museum in Auburn, Indiana, during Labor Day. That's a really unbelievably, it's an old school event, but they take out all these $1 million cars and they drive them in a little parade around the city, and people are just out of their, just having so much fun watching all of this and, waving at the crowd and doing all that kind of stuff. Like, hey, Bomber.
That's all. We look forward for you to checking out some of the cruising and shows that we do here locally too.
Yes,
See if we
no.
can get on a list of coolness.
Well,
like
you know
those.
what? That brings up, last year, and depending on where you locate and who's involved and so forth, that can throw things because the Be Cool Car Cruise was a really big event, and it still is. It's now called the Cool City Car Show. The Salvation Army put on a really nice event with their food truck and sloppy joes and things that you don't normally get as a participant. And that was just, we need some help there. We can draw a lot of people here, and I'd like to invite you to participate in that because
sir.
it's all local people. They've got a serious food bank there where they take care of an unbelievable amount of people here locally. They've got a church inside there where their faith on Sunday, they have a Sunday service. They preach the Alcohol Anonymous, the kind of get you out of the drinking world or
Yes,
the
sir.
drug-related world or all of the family challenges that we all have with rising prices and the cost of food and all of that. It's really, and it's localized, so it's Bay County. So and every nickel that gets put into these events either go to the Cancer Society, either goes to local churches, local food pantries, just like the coffee, what do they call it, the scalded goat or the...
Excited Goat.
Oh, the Excited Goat.
Yes, sir.
Well, they're kind of back out of the way, but they're in a really neat area.
Yes.
It's a cool place to go. Even my wife and her girls go there from time to time.
For sure.
If you want a donut or a cup of coffee or something like that, I've got to take a minute and go over there myself, but I'm going to join that because the people that put together, they don't have to be multi-hundreds of people to make a nice little show, a little small show like Bernie Park here in Bay City.
Yes, sir.
There might be 50 cars there, and the church puts it on, and the communities get together, and they have a little cookout thing, and it's just a nice place to, after church on Sunday, go over there and meet some of the local guys.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah, join us on these kind of things. It's like Cars and Coffee. These
Oh,
little
for sure.
events that
They're
are going
fun.
on all over the world, really.
Yes, sir.
Where guys take their hot rod, get a donut and a coffee, and chat for a couple hours, and they take off and go see their family and do that kind of thing.
Yes. My buddy Eagle wanted me to ask you this question about Pontiac. Smokey and the Bandit.
Oh, boy.
If Smokey and the Bandit was in a Mustang, or if Bandit was in a Mustang, would Smokey have called him? I won't let you answer that one.
No, that's a good question, but I will tell you, the Barrett Jackson people, the Mecum people now, some of these auctions that are big auctions, they inflate things in some good ways and not so good ways. Those cars have got really much more valuable because of the television presence that they had back in the
Indeed.
late 70s and the 80s.
For sure.
And for people of that age, there's a fellow in Saginaw that just loves that kind of thing. That's a little bit too new for me. I like the earlier ones, but it's
sure.
all age-based. And if there's something that might be tied to maybe a famous company, a famous movie, running the streets of San Francisco like on the Bullet and that Mustang.
Oh, yeah.
That whole thing lit a 67 Mustang. So when we see these kinds of things that are entertaining for car people on television, then people will build let's say, recreations or retros, and it creates a whole nother market. So it's good for the market. It's good for the people that are making parts. It's good for the car collectors, so their collections get a little bit more valuable.
Yes,
But
sir.
then some of it gets way out of control, and that's the part of it that's not. It pulls a lot of people that might be interested in doing such a thing into, several $100,000 for some of these things. It just takes the fun out. It'd be an investment thing or a museum. It's really good for museums and to draw traffic in, like
For
the
sure.
Peterson Museum in LA.
To have those types cars.
Yeah, they have those movie type cars, and then they have them on display, and the kids love it, and the parents like it, and people that they're kind of drawing cards. Maybe NASCAR will have a few in the Auburn Museum, but guys will want to see the old '60s NASCARs, what they look like, how they developed over the years, and how they are today in comparison, which is not anywhere as close. That's a moving target that's fast.
Oh, for sure. Yes, sir. All right. Those are 10 general questions. These are just going to kind of be little quick ones. Like import cars. Do you have a favorite?
Oh boy, I call them rice burners. But I will say that it's got the little hood scoop on the front. I can't even tell you what the car maker is, but they're really quick and they got a lot of torque.
Oh, the Subaru.
The Subaru.
WRX.
Yeah, WRX.
Yes,
I mean, they make very different noises, and when they pass you at 100 miles an hour, you're going like, what the heck is this? I'm used to the Smitty mufflers and some of the side pipes and that kind of a thing. So I'm going to say that in the import world, and we built some cooling upgrades for the BMW, the little SCCA kind of BMWs, and the Mustangs at Miller Race Park in Utah, and some of the, let's say the Porsches, the race that's going on at Sebring right this weekend. That's a big deal. I think there was like 4,000 cars and whole total 19 or 20 different classes that are there doing what they love to do.
Yes,
So who can't like a Ferrari or a Porsche or that kind of a thing?
Oh, for sure.
They're a little expensive to take out and do vintage racing with, but there's a lot of guys still doing it.
Oh, yes, sir. Were you ever into motorcycles?
You know what? I had a 350 Honda, which was kind of like a trail bike that I'd take back and forth from work to home to work to home, and I wasn't much of a motorcycle guy because I wasn't good with how you got to tip the bike to go around the corner, and when you're a kid and you don't have a roll cage and you drop one twice, you come up with the decision, you know what, I'm selling this motorcycle because it doesn't have a roll cage and I only get 2 arms and 2 hands and all of this. I'm going to hurt myself being the kind of driver I am, a bit more aggressive when I was younger, but I just soon have a roll cage inside the car if I'm going to race it. And I got a lot of respect, even like the Jay Leno projects that we've been involved with. He's got 150 really fancy cars, but he's got 150 motorcycles. I didn't know that. But I mean, these things are, some of them are way more valuable than a lot of the cars that he's got. So if you're Ralph Lauren or if you got an old Harley, that's right up these collectors' alley.
Yes, sir.
And I love the, I don't know, like the engineering, some of the fancy looks. It's the same amount of effort in a lot of ways to hand build a motorcycle
For sure.
as it would be a hot rod engine or anything like that.
Yes, sir. Did you do much with 1/8 mile, or were you mostly 1/4 mile?
Well, in the early days, it was all 1/4 mile. They really didn't even, as I remember, I don't think they even had many 1/8 mile tracks. But if they did, it was very few, and it was usually because they didn't have a big, let's say, shutdown area. So today, gosh, a lot of like our testing and things that'll happen hopefully before Easter. That'll all be done on an 1/8 mile, testing the clutch, testing the way the chassis is set up, making your shock adjustments and your chassis adjustments, how much lift you might have in the front end and the back end, and how you want to set the compression on your shock absorber or the rebound, mostly compression in a drag car.
Yes, sir.
And the tire pressures, the track pressures, all of this data. There's so much data that you can have today. It's hard to apply it in useful ways. That's why we have Mike Cates as a crew chief and a test driver to prep things. So when I jump in the car to set the record, I'm going to have a little bit of intel before I do that.
There you go. That's awesome.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite NASCAR driver?
Well, I would say that, I was at Hendrick's shop 2 weeks ago, and then I was at Childress's shop. In terms of talent, I think they both have talent. I guess being a GM guy, I kind of fall back to Dale Earnhardt Sr. And the people that I still work with today that worked with him back in that time. Joel Dubose being a cylinder head man at Musée Racing today, doing the big 8,000-9,000 horse, or not 1,000 horse, but 1,000 cubic inch motors that God knows what the power ranges are. It's out of this world. But all of that development. But favorite driver, I don't know. I guess I can shift because if the GM guys are winning, that usually puts a smile on my face, and it puts a smile on the people that I know personally from being in their shops. So anything that supports, let's say, a business agreement, a personal relationship. More
Oh, yes, sir.
importantly,
Yeah. Got to root for your buddies.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
people that you really love and trust that are very humble when you really get to meet them, and they're as smart as a whip, or they got so many responsibilities, it's unbelievable. Or they'll jump on a plane tonight, go to a NASCAR race, and be back in their office the next day just to do their part. So,
Yes, sir.
yeah, those would be my top choices. But
That's
I like it, like the rest of it. I love them all.
Oh,
Really.
for sure. Yes,
I love
sir.
the guy that's winning.
That's right. That's right. Do you have a favorite drag racing track?
Well, I have two. Other than local tracks, I would rank them with Indy. If you can win at Indy or race at Indy, it's a real special event. It's an invitation, so you have to do a pretty fair amount of work before they just don't let you in because you got a big name or you're this or you're that. You have to qualify in certain ways to make it there. It's kind of like the NASCAR groups that make a, let's say, a certain amount of points before you qualify. They don't let everybody in. You got to go through a pretty big process to get there.
Yes, sir.
Bowling Green is where I set the first national record back in the 70s. I love that track because it's old school. It's got the little covers where if it rains, the crowd doesn't get wet.
Oh, yeah.
The track is fast and well taken care of, but it's aged. And then Mile and Dragway would be my third best. And then a lot of them are great tracks, really nice. Chicago's very prestigious if you go and you're invited to race there. So that would rank with some of the better ones.
Yes, sir. How about favorite NASCAR tracks?
Well, I would say I've been to Michigan. That was my only real NASCAR race where I was actually there when the cars were going by us at 200 miles an hour, putting up all of the dirt and everything that happens. But I'm going to say around the Charlotte area would probably be my, because I've got clients and customers around there and friends around there. I would say around that Concord area, Charlotte, the drag strip there, the 4 wide drag strip there. All of these race complexes are beyond a normal guy's concentration. It just blows your mind. I have went to the driving school at Las Vegas and went around that track at about 160 miles an hour. And then with an F1 guy in a two-man deal. That's a whole kind of experience. Mario Andretti's school is really cool because they put you through school before they put you on the track.
That's
and then
awesome.
they allow you to kind of come up and come out until you get to the point where you're not capable of driving, let's say at 200, they'll cut you back and cut you back to your comfort range so you don't end up hurting yourself.
For sure. And speaking of Mario, F1, what is
Yes.
your thoughts on F1 racing?
Well, F1 for the little bit that I know, and some of the work that we've been involved with in the cooling world, is the budgets are out of this world. I think a few years back, an average team, not a winning team, but an average team in the development world in Birmingham, England, and around that area of the world, they spend $750 million for 1 year. It's like, how can
Yeah.
you spend that much money in 1 year doing development stuff? Well, they've figured it out.
They kind
And the F1 world in cooling has a lot of different coolers around the car. It doesn't have like a traditional radiator and cooling system. So they're very concerned about air coming over the car, what's going on with the air, how much pressure is underneath the car so that the car doesn't take off and fly. Carbon fiber and air tunnel testing and any of that kind of a thing is a fundamental step in all of that. Today in Europe, they're doing a lot of, let's say, electrification in the F1 world. I think for 5 years, they've been running series in like Switzerland or England and Le Mans and so forth, where they've had, let's say, hybrid applications where there's an engine and a battery, and they kind of work with each other so they can get distance, which isn't very
Yes, sir.
far right now. But added power, it's good for the CO2 going in the air. I was reading yesterday where in one race, were working at trying to take 8,900 pounds of carbon out of the air from one race. Not only with the diesels that are in the parking lot with the big trucks that run the generators and all of that,
Yes, sir.
they burn diesel. They put carbon in the air. We're trying to find ways to minimize that and to make a 20 to 25% reduction in CO2, which is quite a challenge, and it's very inventive, thanks to people like Pat Wall, people at Childress, people at racing industries are putting their engineering, like the Pratt Miller people in Detroit. They've all done a lot of this type of thing, like the mid-engine Corvette. I seen one probably 25 years ago at Pratt Miller in Detroit.
Yes, sir.
But they didn't make it until here now with the C8. So those types of developments are done far in advance. A lot of people don't realize most of what you see in a car dealership today was developed and finished and prototyped 5 years ago.
Oh, for sure.
So if you think something's brand new today, believe me, it's been along for a long time and for all the right reasons.
Yes, sir.
Hear that motorcycle going
I hear
by?
that
There you go.
motorcycle.
See what
We've
I'm
got-
talking about?
Good. Even it is a bit cold today, but it is some good weather. You mentioned it then, but Le Mans.
Yes. Well, I happen to be working on a cooling project at Pratt Miller in I say Detroit, but they're in New Hudson, Michigan, over by Brighton. And they were loading up 3 tractor trailers of, like full-size tractor trailers, like semis,
Yes, sir.
with all of the equipment, the computers, the diagnostics, the race cars, the spare engines, the spare parts, everything that you need to participate in that race. And then they put those things on big airplanes and fly them over to France and Germany and all of these, Italy, I think. And of course, they have to, it's like a race shop on wheels, but it's it's like art, the way that they have their team trained for all of these things. They've got a setup team that puts all of the little cones around their area and roped off their area, sets up all the toolboxes and all the computer and all the satellites. I mean, it's crazy what they can do, and they make it look so simple.
Oh, yeah.
But let me tell you, the planning and the cost to do such a thing is beyond the
Oh, yeah.
norm.
It's crazy just the advancements in technology, even in the last 10 years. And versus, I mean,
Yeah.
you even look like from the 60s to now, it's just night and day.
Yeah, well, from, let's say, 1990, if you had an office and a fax machine, you were something special.
Oh, for sure.
Today, we don't even use a fax machine. We got one here, we don't use it.
Yes, sir.
Everything is more electronically. Send an email, send a text, send a Facebook thing, send a
That's
whatever. In the quickness, just like what you're going to see once you edit this, Bomber's going to have something probably for Sunday or whenever this comes live, and it seems like it's simple, but there's a pretty fair amount to it.
For sure. Yes, sir. One last thing, and then I'll have like a little ending question. The General Motors plant down the road has that beautiful water tower with the Chevrolet logo on it, and it's got some pretty cool looking patina on it.
Yes.
With your connections, do you think you can get me on top of that water tower?
Are you?
I don't know.
Hang on a minute. You got that size of guts?
Oh,
to
yeah,
Crawl
we
up
can-
on top of that?
we can do that.
I don't know. I would suggest something a little different. I think we can find a fella running a drone, and maybe somehow do that in safer ways.
I'll have yes.
I never say no to anything that sounds like a good time, but when the safety gets a little crazy, then maybe I stop and think about that. But that would make an interesting deal, and I might even have some footage now that you say that.
It is-
that might be interesting to plug along with this.
It is
In fact, I'm
definitely
sure
my
it will.
favorite.
You're gonna see some stuff about Essexville you don't know about.
Yeah, that is definitely my favorite water tower.
Yes.
I know I don't have any other favorites, but that one is my favorite.
Oh, well, there's a great big one in the south end. That huge monster. It's probably one of the biggest ones. It's kind of like the one in Florence, Kentucky. It says Florence Hall on it.
Yes.
But it's another really, I mean, from I-75, you can't miss going by it. It's
For sure.
It's one of the best pieces of advertising, I think, in the United States.
It is, for
So,
sure.
yeah, we will work on that for sure.
Okay, last thing, we've got this right here. Would you just give us a little description of what this beauty is right here?
Okay, well, the reason why we built this, it's part of the GTO project that's here. It was a Woodward racer back in the, let's say, the early 70s or in the 80s maybe. But what they did, I think to go fast, was they put a 400 cubic inch, what I call a D-port 400 ram air motor. Not a round port, a D-port. But it has a very rare aluminum intake manifold that they had for a short period of time. It's all been blueprinted here with Pat McCarthy here in Bay City. It's a dated 1970, so if you had like a 70 Judge or a GTO, those are some really, I mean, those things get crazy in pricing, like
They do.
multi-hundreds of thousands. And it's got all of the proper balancing and the proper pistons and cylinder bores. This is a real stump puller. Got the dated carburetor and a few odds and ends over here that go along with it to make it go fast. But this is, I'm going to conservatively say we're looking at between 500 and 600 real horsepower. Real
yes.
horsepower at the crankshaft. And it will burn the tires off the back end of that GTO there if we give it a chance.
That is awesome.
So, yeah, it's all local. It's a preservation of what we love to do. It's part of the project that's going to get finished by someone else, but we get it this far. We wanted to make sure that we're careful with all the proper fasteners and nuts and bolts that it takes. And more importantly, the measurements and the final assembly work that goes on with Pat McCarthy here locally. Even the little water pump was done by a retired tech center guy in Detroit. Those kinds of, let's say, skills are being lost every day in the machine shop world.
Oh, for sure.
So, regardless, it's a really cool piece. It's a carburetor. It'll take some pump gas, but it'll probably run better. Well, there's a nitrous bottle, if I had to say. I'm not using it, but there's a nitrous bottle. If you're in Detroit, you better have one in case you need it.
That's right.
So,
just in case.
Just in case. So, with all that being said, it's just a really neat project. We saved a lot of beautiful parts, and it's heading down the road here shortly. So if you're interested, give Bomber a bump.
Hey, y'all, we appreciate it. Roger, I appreciate talking to you. This has been awesome. With the rest of our series with Roger, we're going to go over some individual projects, some of the rides around here, and just focus specifically on them and chat about them. We'll do those over the next, I don't know, couple
Hey,
of
we're
weeks,
not in a
months.
big hurry.
Yeah. So this is going to be a great series with him, and I just want to document what he's doing locally, his wealth of knowledge, and I am glad that I have met him as a friend. And
Yeah.
I appreciate your time, Roger.
Well, we had an extension of what I call the vendor hot lunch program. So we started off with a good lunch, and we'll end it with some local history that I think we'll try to keep you entertained. Let's say that.
For sure. Thank y'all so much. We appreciate it. Bye, y'all.
Thank you.